Oh, my bike feels awful. Ugh. Okay, this is a good reminder as to why you need to do pre-ride checks on your bike if it's new, if it's been in storage, you haven't ridden it for a while, or if, like me, you've just had your bike in transit on an airplane. Stick with me, I'm going to go through all of the essential pre-ride checks. Let's go. Now, for most of these checks, you might get away with not doing them for every ride, but this one check I will do before every single ride because it makes such a massive difference. Tire pressure affects your bike's handling, the way it feels, how comfortable it is, your traction. It'll also affect how many punctures you can get as well. So it is really important, and also it's one of the fastest things to change on your bike. You can lose air pressure over time. If you go through different temperature changes or air pressure changes, that might actually affect it as well. So do get yourself a pump with a gauge on it, or better still, get yourself a tire pressure gauge so that you can check that the air pressure is right every single time you ride. Checking your brakes is obviously essential for safety, but also control and comfort and making you feel nice and confident out on the trails. And this is something I instinctively do before every ride as well. And what I'll do is I'll apply, say, the front brake and give it a push forward, make sure it grabs nicely and the back wheel lifts. And then you can check the back by pulling the back brake and rolling backwards. And you should get a nice lift on the front there. And also you just want to make sure that they don't feel spongy and that levers aren't going all the way back to the bars, because if they are a bit spongy like that, or they're going back to the bars, then chances are you're going to need your brakes bled. Now, we have done videos like this on the channel, so do check those out if you want to do it yourself, or maybe it's time to head to a professional to get some servicing on that bike. Now, there's nothing more annoying than being out on the trail and having a drivetrain that doesn't work. So it's a nice idea to check this before you go out riding, just to make sure that you don't have any of those annoyances. Now, you want to cycle through your gears and make sure that it all works and your chain's not falling off in any direction, and everything is working nice and quietly as well. If your gears are skipping or making a lot of noise, then there might be something that you need to fix. Now, we have done a lot of videos, so do check out those on the channel if you want some help tuning or indexing your gears, as we call it. Sometimes if your bike's been away for a long period of time and the lubricant has dried off, then a lot of the time your drivetrain can work poorly and be really noisy, even if there's nothing wrong with it. And it might just be that it needs a bit of lubrication on the chain. So do check that first before you start cycling through the gears. If you want to check your suspension before you go out for a ride, the key indicators are checking around the seals, making sure that they are in good condition, so they shouldn't be frayed. Your little O-rings shouldn't be perishing in any way, which they can over time. And also check the stanchions for any leaks or oil that's coming out of the lowers when you compress into your suspension. Sometimes with your rear shocks, you might get a black goo or liquid or something coming out of the main body of the air can and onto the shaft, and that's an indicator that it's going to need servicing pretty soon, if not immediately. Also, do check your sag, so that's how much your suspension compresses with your body weight on that bike, because that is often adjusted by air if you have air forks and an air shock. And you might want to reset that and check that it's still the same if it's been in storage for a while, because air might travel out or change over time. Now, if you've been on holiday for a long period of time and done some hard riding, this is a check for you when you get home. But also it's a good idea to do this one periodically anyway, because they can go unnoticed. And that is checking the conditions of your wheels. So first up, you can just lift your bike and make sure that everything is spinning well. So that is obviously checking whether the disc is flowing through the calipers correctly. But also you can look down and check to see if it's in line. If there's a wobble, it could be that your tire is a little bit off, so check the bead, but it also could be that your wheels are slightly buckled, and that's going to need fixing because it means your spokes are not equally tensioned, which gives you that wobble, and that could end up with a breakage down the line if you don't fix it. Also, you want to clean up your bike regularly and inspect the rims. You want to be checking for any cracks if it's carbon or any dents if it's aluminium. You might get away with a dent, but a crack is something you're definitely going to need to get fixed or replaced. Now, it's a good idea to do a few drop tests and bangs around with the bike to see if there's any rattling. A lot of the time that would be just a wheel that hasn't been done up properly, so do check all of your axles and in the front and the rear for your wheels. But if you still get a rattle at the front, then that is often a loose headset. Now, this is easy fix. It just requires an Allen key. And what you need to do is make sure you loosen up the stem first, because your headset needs to be compressed from the top cap down to the fork. So from here. So if your stem is done up, you'll only be compressing the top cap into the stem, and that won't actually be clamping the headset. So make sure you loosen that, give it a nice tighten until it feels firm and the rattle goes away, and then you can tighten up the stem. The best way to know for sure that it is the headset is to turn your bike at the front and apply the front brake, whichever one that is, and give your bike a little rock forward and backward, and you will hear a knocking or a clicking if your headset is loose. So once that's stopped, you should have fixed the problem. This is another one for those of you who have been out on holiday having a hard week of riding, or even just at the end of summer when you've had a hard summer's ride. But also it's a good idea to do this pretty much every time you wash your bike, and that is a frame check. So once your bike is nice and clean and you can see all of it, just inspect it. If it's carbon, you are looking for cracks, often jaggedy in the paintwork. That'll mean it's a crack that needs to be repaired or warranted by your frame manufacturer. But you also need to do this if you have an alloy bike or a steel bike or titanium as well. Those can crack too. It's not just a carbon thing. And you particularly want to check around all the welds as well, because that is a common place for it to fail. If you're doing a full bike check, you might as well go ahead and check all your cables, as these are quite important, especially your brake hoses. So run your fingers down them, make sure there's no holes or cuts or any fraying. Sometimes your cables can rub together and wear holes in them, so do check those. And also just make sure they're moving freely. They're not rubbing on anything on your frame, and there's no excessive kinks in your hoses or your gear cables, as that might cause a bit of damage later down the line. It should go without saying that a bolt check is absolutely essential for safety. At the very least, you should be checking the axles for your wheels, but it doesn't hurt to check all the bolts on your bike to make sure nothing is loose. And often frames will have torque measurements written on them, perhaps 6 Nm, which means Newton meters. So do get yourself a Torx wrench if you want to torque them up correctly. One of the most important checks that I do regularly is to make sure that my stem and my handlebars are secure. So I grab the front wheel with my knees and I give the handlebars a good push on either side to make sure that they don't move. Because when you're riding, you'll put force into them on a corner and they can slip. And trust me, I've done that one before and it really hurts. Don't forget, your gear is part of your safety and your experience on a bike as well. So do periodic checks on those as well, particularly your helmet. I will always inspect my helmet after a good riding summer, after any crashes or knocks. I'll also check them after it's been in transit, perhaps traveling with it. And what you want to do is get your helmet and look for any imperfections or any cracks. If it is cracked, it is definitely time to replace it, as it's not as safe as it should be. Also, if you ride in clipless, then you might want to keep an eye on your cleats, because they will wear over time. That's what they're designed to do. So make sure that they are nice and crispy when you clip them into your pedals, because if you clip in and you can pull your feet directly up and out of the pedals, then that's a good sign that something's not quite right. Perhaps your cleats are worn and they need replacing, or maybe you can dial up the tension on your pedals a little bit instead. Anyway, that's all of my essential pre-ride checks, and I think it goes without saying that regular maintenance and regular checks means a safer and a more enjoyable mountain bike experience, so do take them seriously. But for now, thank you for watching, and let me know down in the comments below if there's any more checks or advice that you want in the future.